lifestyle and behavior are important parts of health, both prevention and treatment. You know, everybody knows this. They hear every day that they should eat better, they should exercise, that, they shouldn't stress out and relax, they shouldn't smoke or drink too much. This is common knowledge. But the question is, how do you actually make it happen in your life so that it's a natural part of your habits? It's not something you're struggling for. Good day, and it's a great pleasure for everyone online listening to us, and a great pleasure to have a guest that I've literally been waiting decades for to have this conversation with, Dr. Eric Pepper. For those of you watching this online, I'm sure, appreciate the benefits of technology. And we all have benefited from that. And at the same time, for those of you who are watching this online, I'm sure you've seen the downsides of technology and the negative impact it has had for you. And now with the pandemic, with the holidays coming, and we've seen those benefits and those downsides sort of on steroids. It's been magnified and exacerbated in those areas. And so it's important for us to put our antenna up and pay attention, be mindful, be aware of what technology is doing for us and to us in these areas. And that's the topic that I would like to talk about with my special guest today, Dr. Eric Pepper. But before that, I want to just tell you a little bit about this fellow that you're going to be listening to here. He literally is one of the pioneers in a term that now is batted about in top-level medical journals and on the media, the idea of holistic health and whole person care. Because he started at a state university, San Francisco State University, a course which continues to this day, way back in 1976. And I went and visited him then, and I saw that course, and I said, wow, is this just a California thing? Well, maybe back then it was, but now we're realizing more and more all over the world that taking care of the whole person, mind, body, social, and spirit, is the only way we're actually going to improve health. We're actually going to address some of the challenges in our healthcare system, such as the rising costs, the growing disparities that are occurring, and actually the lowered value that we're getting in actual health in those areas. So it's my great pleasure to welcome Dr. Pepper and tap on his wisdom over many, many decades, and I'm sure we'll have you back. But today we're going to talk about things. Dr. Pepper, thank you for being with us today.
Well, Wayne, thank you so much for the invitation. And you just really reminded me about our program at San Francisco State, because it is, to me, it's still remarkable that it's there. It's the first one in the state universities. But even like today, I feel so excited about it because I just almost finished the semester. And in this semester, students have to do self-healing projects. And they vary all over the place. Some people are diabetic. Some people want to just be physically fit. And what we see is when you make it part of a university curriculum, then the students also need to practice the skills. They do homework, and that self-experiential component, by changing their lifestyle, all of a sudden their symptoms decrease or disappear. I just did a poll last night with the students and asked how many of you, even over Thanksgiving break, still implemented that? And for example, change your diet. And many of them had done it over the semester, so they're eating less of the highly processed foods. And then how many of you feel better? And almost all the hands went up. And we forget it's through the experience of doing that we get change.
Yeah.
And so it's a real plus.
It's fantastic. And you were and are a pioneer in this area. And I'll have to say that we help work with and support a growing program at the University of California, Irvine, another California university, that is trying to transform all of its healthcare
Yes.
curricula and delivery to a whole person perspective. So I'm going to point them. I hope they're watching this. I'm going to point them in your direction as a mentor and as someone that can assist them in doing this as they take this on. So thank you for that. So your latest book, and I want you to show it to us here after I ask you the first question, is called Tech Stress. And this is about yes, thank you. Please hold that up. This is a book. I actually don't have the book in front of me because I brought it home. I was reading it again last night and I forgot to bring it to the studio here. This is a book that actually I think is especially in the pandemic and especially during the holidays, becomes front and center in terms of our ability to manage our own health and well-being, not just health, but our very well-being, our very ability to enjoy life, to find joy in life in those areas. Can you tell us a little bit about sort of why you wrote this book and the core messages that you're trying to get across in what technology does to us and for us, and how do we manage that?
Well, the book really started many years ago when we worked with a person who had pain working at the computer. At that point, it was called repetitive strain injury. And the person was referred to us. We worked with the person. And then we observed that the ergonomic changes that were recommended were all perfect. The right height, the person sat perfectly, except they continued to have pain. And that led to the concept that ergonomics is insufficient. It's really a whole system perspective. And there are a number of themes underlying it. I think theme one is that we are unaware that we are bracing our shoulders, our whole tension, shallow breathe, and we work at the computer. That's a physiological side. The second one is that we are captured by the screen. We don't know that we are captured. We look at the screen, our eyes don't blink, we keep focusing, we stay there, and by the end of the day, we are exhausted. That's on the mechanical side. Then what we then used was biofeedback to monitor what was happening in the body, and then we could show to the person that when they were working, their shoulders were up. They didn't know it. And then they could see it, they could learn awareness and inhibit. That was almost our first articles. And then we noticed when people started to do that, their health improved. However, it's become much more complex than that, because now we don't have just computers, that's ergonomics. We use cell phones. And now most of us, when we're sitting during the day, we have sitting disease, I would argue, and we just collapse slightly. And when we collapse without knowing, we're putting ourselves in a body position which really encourages being more depressed and probably more anxious. The anxiety probably occurs because also I am breathing more quickly, I keep having tension, and I reinterpret. And so it's our body posture collapsed. By staying in this position, we have more access to hopeless and helpless thoughts. We have tension we're unaware of. And then, without any awareness, we are captured by the screen. We really forget, and that is, I think, one of the missing messages is really that we are captured by the screen because of our evolution. We have evolution survival behaviors. And one of the behaviors is, when there's a stimulus out there, is to orient and look at it. Because it could be friend or foe, it could be food. And this happens automatically as people do it. And then when we do that, we usually give some form of arousal, so we're chronically aroused. And the other parts is how we are even thinking or behaving, because when we are captured by the computer, that's all we're doing. We lose our peripheral perception. You can look at the data, even walking around the street with people with cell phones. They're looking down. And when they're looking down, ever since the iPhone has occurred, there has been a systematic increase in pedestrian accidents and deaths, because we are unaware of the periphery at that moment. And the more I do that, not only am I unaware of the periphery, I become unaware of my social connections. And here's the other part that happens. And this was so sad to me when we did the initial studies at San Francisco State with the students. I asked it, what we observed is when students went to class, that's the pre-pandemic, they would meet in class and they would be looking down at their cell phone. That's their socializing. And then there was a break and they would look down again and text or whatever they'd be doing. And I remembered a few years before that they would be more interacting socially. And then I asked the students, we did a little survey and we asked a simple question. When you're in a social setting, when, and you feel your cell phone vibrating in your pocket and you're talking to somebody, what you tend to do for that moment is you pick up the cell phone and look at it. Or you just even get distracted in your brain and you wonder what's going on. When someone does that with you, how do you feel? And what people then reported, which is the obvious, I feel almost dismissed. I make a social break. I really break that social contract, which is really discouraging in some ways. And then you ask the question, how many of you have that experience? All the hands almost go up. And they ask, how many still do it? Almost all the hands go up.
Yeah.
And the reason partly is because of our evolutionary traps. That's a very important concept, that you really have almost no choice. The moment you put your cell phone there, without any awareness, your attention goes to it and is wondering what is the message, because you have been conditioned now over months, years to respond quickly. And that is a remarkably interruptive for our attention, for our social networks. And given the holidays coming up, if there's any rule I would say for families, however difficult it is, when you get together, leave the cell phone at the door. Don't even put it in your pocket. Don't put it on the table, because if you put it on the table without awareness, you will start looking at it. It will interrupt the connection. It will feel lonely at times. You feel disconnected from people. The cell phones can be great, especially with the pandemic, to keep in contact. Yet we forget that we are totally trapped by them. And our attentional abilities are shifting. Think of how when you concentrate and are with somebody. As we're talking here, what happens is I'm talking to Wayne, hopefully, and to the audience. He's listening to me. He's paying attention. So he's staying present. And he's deepening his brain, maybe processing this, or you as the audience. But now your cell phone goes. You look at it. At that moment, you disconnect. You go right back up into the present of the new topic. And then it takes a while to go back. And the analogy we use is almost like scuba diving. When you get involved in something in work, you dive down to the bottom. That's where you do all your deep work. And you work and work and work. Then when the message comes up, you pop right back up. But then you have to decompress. That is time. And then you have to go down again later. You decompress. So you're really much less effective.
I'm glad you mentioned the evolutionary perspective. As a physician, I'm always looking at what does our behavior and our mind do to our body? How does it influence and impact our body? And I remember a research project I read about several years ago, in which just getting out into nature and looking up at the trees. You talked about our looking down, especially on these things. The effect that a psychological and physiological effect that it has. But this study showed that simply looking up and walking through the trees for a couple hours or even an hour bumped up the natural killer cells, and they stayed up for several hours, even days, in some cases for that. And so your immune system, given that we're in a pandemic, actually worked better
Yes.
if you were able to do that. And evolutionarily wise, our bodies were adapted to this kind of motion. I'm not on a standing desk right now because I wanted to be steady for this interview with you, but normally I'm on a standing desk. And it will actually raise, my posture differently. But what I hear you saying is that we need to really rethink and redesign our physical and behavioral and social interactions because, and largely because of technology, which has exacerbated this, it has drawn us away from the natural approaches and the environmental triggers that kept us moving, kept us thinking, kept us interacting. And now that does not happen. automatically in those areas.
So, so
The
let me let me
please.
explain and give an example of this from an evolutionary perspective. From an evolutionary perspective, you're walking around 50,000 years ago, you'll be looking up, you're looking to the side. You would never really say in this fixed position all the time. So when you move and you wiggle, you tighten some muscles, but then in the movement, you relax some other ones. The body posture, the one you really point out, is critical. And it's so hard to conceive that. What we forget is when we collapse, we compress almost the area of our abdomen. It can't really be compressed, but it means the abdominal content goes up, pushes against the diaphragm. It means we breathe shallowly, which leads to other challenges. But more importantly, mind and body are connected both ways. And our posture changes our thoughts and emotions and vice versa. So if it's okay, what I like to do is do a little very short exercise experiment for people to do this, to how powerful posture is. And especially in the epidemic, I'm starting to see of an increasing sense of low energy, of a sense of being depressed and hopeless with so many of our students. Okay, so all you do in this little exercise, I'm going to ask you to sit in a certain position and evoke a set of memories. It will take a very short time. Just collapse for a moment. The classical cell phone look. So you're collapsed, your spine is like a letter C. You're sort of looking down. And in this position, evoke only hopeless, helpless, powerless, defeated memories, one after the other. Just do this. Evoke those. So that's hopeless, helpless, powerless, defeated memories. Keep in this position. Just evoke one after the other. I'm going to make this exercise a bit shorter. You can do this also later by yourself. Now, in this position, do not change your position. Evoke optimistic and empowering memories, one after the other. So you're evoking powerless, evoking optimistic and empowering memories in this collapsed, slouched position. And just keep doing that. Now I'd like you to arch up. Just like Wayne said earlier, look upward to the trees, you look up. And in this up position, I'd like you to evoke hopeless, helpless, powerless, defeated memories. In this up position. Just like Wayne said, I'm walking through the woods, but now I'm evoking these hopeless, helpless, powerless memories.
It's hard to do.
And we can do it longer. And now keep holding the same up position and evoke optimistic, empowering, positive memories. I think that's enough. And I think you already gave the answer too early, but I think if you check yourself, what we see is about 90% of people, when they are slouching, they have easy access with hopeless, helpless memory. Depends on your past. Some people more than others. Some people get totally flooded. Tears will come. On the other hand, when they're in a slouched position, evoking positive memories is possible. It's harder. And in the work with Yi-Mei Ling, we did an EEG study. We showed the brain literally had to work harder while trying to evoke positive memories in this collapsed position. While when you sit up, it was slightly easier to evoke positive memories. And even when you could evoke the hopeless memories, as if you often were more distant to it. You know, we have no sense that our body posture affects our cognitions and emotions. And it's even more interesting that when you do this now in school with students, and you ask to do mental math, just subtract the number, 13 from 87 sequentially, that's 87, minus 13, that would be 64, etc. Keep going quickly down, and you do this, then you see that when students are in this collapsed slouch position, which you get to almost automatically when the desk is flat, that's the ergonomic side, because you're leaning forward, it is significantly harder to do the math than if you're in the up position. Most interesting. Yeah. The only students for whom posture made no difference, which was very interesting, was a small subset of students who had no history by self-report of having test anxiety, math phobia, freezing up in class. You could say they were happy-go-lucky. If you're totally happy-go-lucky and don't give a damn, then posture makes no difference. But I didn't know that many students who are in class who are not slightly worried about performance. That's our normal life anyway.
Well, I'm sorry for preempting your answer on this, because it was immediately obvious to me that it was much easier to think of the uplifting thoughts when I was like this than I was down like this. I mean, it was just an immediate shift in perspective on this. You know, this is a fundamental set of skills, along with other health types of skills, that we need to be training and teaching and modeling for our young people from early on. At our Thanksgiving celebration this year at our family, we had individuals in our family from 1 year old to 92 years old. And they were all somehow struggling with technology, okay? The 92-year-old was on Facebook trying to stay connected to her friends, etc. Other people were shopping online because they had just done a gift exchange app. And even the 1-year-old, who the parents are very careful with about not exposing to technology during the pandemic, that was the only way they could interact with us, even to get familiar with us. Many of the family members had never met the 1-year-old, okay, because of isolation during the pandemic. And so the 1-year-old knew the cell phone was an important thing, even though it was off. And I remember seeing a study that even if your cell phone is off and you're not looking at it, it's maybe on the side of the table, it still occupies a part in your brain in space that reduces your ability to actually think of other things. It has an impact. It produces a cognitive deficit, and essentially just by being in the same space. So checking your cell phones at the door seems to be a great approach for this. But these types of things, you know, what is a message to some of the young people, some of the young parents who are struggling with this right now, as their kids have been schooling at home, as they're, they've been isolated from family and friends? I mean, do you offer things in your book that are practical tips for helping, parents work with their young people in these areas?
I think the first thing to remember is that it's really like an evolutionary trap, that we want to say to the child, take time out, get away from the computer game. And we all have had young children who play computer games, and then the mother says it's time for dinner, and the son says, one more moment. And then an hour later, the child is still playing, because the person has almost no self-control. When we see it as an evolutionary trap, then we realize the tool is exquisitely useful. We don't want to live without the technology, but we need to set boundaries to ourselves, or the parents need to do this. And you can see this sadly when people go to restaurants. It's much easier to give your iPad or your cell phone to the baby, get to entertain, then you have to entertain the child. And yet I think that's the wrong message to give. There we have some control. It takes significant effort. The other part to recognize is that we need to set boundaries, which is very hard. And in China right now, that's what the government has done. I'm not recommending that, but there is a theme of it that I do respect. And that is, in China, children cannot bring their cell phones to school anymore. 2, they only can do an hour a day on social media, and that's monitored by the companies. Beyond that, they can't. They can only play computer games on weekends for an hour or 2. That's government mandated. I know we live in a different country. I'm not recommending that. But in families, parents, I would definitely recommend to set boundaries. That's 1. 2, we need to recognize that we get captured. So we need to have mechanisms to interrupt our frozen sitting behavior. Go outside. Literally, what I have on my computer, for example, is a little program that pops up and it reminds me to stretch. So all of you have been sitting now, most likely. By definition, you're watching this. So just get up for a moment. Just get up. And now just sort of just skip in place. Just enjoy it. Look around to the right and to the left and skip. Look to, look up, skip. And if you're lucky enough that you can look outside, you can look at the tree way to the top, etc. That is probably enough. And now just sit again or stand, whatever you're doing. And simply ask yourself, what happened to your energy level? Did it go up? What happened to your mood? Do you feel slightly better? And in systematic studies, we have demonstrated when people do these simple movements, especially an extension movement versus slouching, their energy goes up, way up. And it's even more impressive for the people who have a history of being depressed. They see the biggest change.
Yeah. Well, we just commissioned for the Harris Poll survey of pain during the pandemic, and we found that young people were now experiencing more pain than older people.
Yes.
Which is the opposite of what you'd expect. And so when we looked at that and thought about that a bit, a lot of it had to do with doing exactly what you're saying. They're working from home, they're over their computers, they're not as active anymore, and they have the stresses on top of that.
Yes.
The kids at home, the job losses, et cetera. And that increases the chances that their pain that would otherwise be minor becomes chronic and chronic pain in those areas. And so the exercise that you just did often is a good way, if they could embed that routinely, to prevent some of the most common types of chronic pain, which is back and neck pain in those areas. So these simple kinds of things. I mean, it seems to me, Eric, that we talk about going to school and coming out with the fundamentals, right? Reading, writing, arithmetic, social interaction. This, to me, health and self-care in our environment that no longer is compatible with our evolution, okay, needs to be a fundamental skill that is taught from, preschool all the way up into the universities as you do. It should be a basic skill that we learn. Imagine the impact that could have on our healthcare system, on costs, on well-being, on multiple on illnesses in those areas. I mean, is this something that we could recommend to our policy listeners that are here?
I would say it is a primary recommendation because 80% of our illnesses, I would say, are lifestyle, socioeconomically linked. And however, you need to learn those skills early on. Let me very simply, when I talk to my students, 30 to 40% don't eat breakfast, or they eat very highly processed foods, which gets them already at risk for type 2 diabetes or inflammatory disease. By just shifting that, you already start reducing massive costs. Teaching students how to eat, how to sit at your computer and how to use yourself. People spend millions of dollars training you in corporations, how to use the software. You need to train the person how to use themselves in those settings and provide the social support to do that. In corporations, that may mean you need to have structure breaks to allow that. And in schools, it means that a teacher every 20 minutes may need to get up, interrupt the teaching, have people do movements versus sitting just only at the desk. It means reestablishing for young children more playtime. Because when you play, you move different muscles, you develop different social connections. To me, it is a necessary skill. I only wish that our program, which is really a model program at San Francisco State, was taught at every university. But it should not be taught at the university. It should be starting in grade school. And
you just gave me an idea for a next person that I'll interview on one of these Facebook Lives who has created a system called Whole Health Education and a curriculum that's going across the country that basically does exactly this, the fundamental skills and core curriculum from preschool, even pre-birth, up through the university components of it. Let me just ask you a little bit about for those of us who didn't learn this in elementary school, okay, which is the majority of us still. We then experience health challenges, and you just mentioned 80% of actual illnesses are behaviorally and lifestyle based, okay? And for those of us that didn't learn that, we end up going to our doctor, okay? Or we go visit our nurse practitioner or our primary care physician or someone else in the healthcare team. And yet rarely does my medical care team ask me these questions, engage in dialogue about these simple kinds of self-care and lifestyle and social behaviors that you've talked about in those areas. So for those of you that are listening, I've developed a set of tools for your provider called the Hope Note, the Healing Oriented Practices and Environments Note. And it's a set of questions that your provider actually can discuss with you that deals with mind, body, social, and the mental and spiritual aspects of your life. Doesn't leave any of those things out. How can the listeners here, what would you recommend in terms of working with their healthcare providers to integrate this? This is what we call sort of integrative care, right? Integrate these determinants of health, the 80%, with what you get when you walk into your doctor's office, the 20% in those areas. Any suggestions for how to facilitate that conversation with your healthcare team?
I think there are two. One, as a practitioner, as a person or the patient, when you go to your physician, always keep in mind that even though they may be hurried, hassled, they really do want the best for you. Take a positive perspective. That's one. Two, if the person doesn't have time, make a second appointment. Three, make your own list. Take that same list the provider has and bring that with you. Look at that. Four, remember that it's easy to say, eat differently, exercise more. We all know that, just like don't smoke. However, the focus should be on training the skills. And that is where I think overall the healthcare system, as a general rule, has not been very successful, because we may tell the person even about some of those things, but we have to realize we live in a family system, a social system, and the whole system needs to be coordinating. So when you're thinking of diet changes, you need to not only deal with the person. It's very hard, like on Thanksgiving, not to eat the pumpkin pie if everybody else is eating pumpkin pie. So, however, if I make a different pie, which we did, we had two choices. I made a berry pie with almond crust, because my wife is gluten-free, and so without any almost sugar. And so we had an option there which was just as tasty as the other one. So I would say for the individual, orchestrate more your social system to get the change done. It's like doing exercise. We know we need exercise or movement, but the movement can be fun. I can do ballroom dancing. If you want to do it on the one hand, I can go hiking in nature, get a dog. One of the best things I ever did for a client of mine was persuaded a very depressed person to get a dog. She finally got this giant dog. Now she complained that the dog was uncontrollable, but all of a sudden she went out every day. She did movement and had something to complain about.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's very simple. The piece is, the challenge for the healthcare system is that first session especially takes time. I think your questions, your whole assessment is phenomenal. I went through it. I said, I wish all my physicians would do that, or all healthcare professionals. But most don't do it. And at most top medical centers, they do not look at that. And that takes a different perspective. It means you have to put money up front almost for the time. But then thereafter, it's much cheaper the long term.
Yes, that's right. I mean, it takes time one way or another, right? It either takes time in a visit where you actually address the questions, or it takes time not addressing the questions over multiple visits and costs even more and takes even more time. And so for listeners that would like this, we've actually put a whole kit, that self-instruction, do-it-yourself kit, and a whole set of resources on our website for your providers. So if you ask them to do an integrative health or a Hope visit and they want to know how, just send them to the website. They can look up the Hope visit there, and they can download for free any and all of the tools that are available to do that. So, Eric, we have some questions coming in now, and welcome others. This has been an incredible conversation. But one of the questions that came in was really about this working from home. You know, we used to be at home, and that was sort of the family domain. And then we went to the office, or we went out and wherever we worked, at school or something, and that was our work area. And then we went back home, and there was sort of this natural division, which now has been dissolved in the pandemic for many, many people. And so the question is, that's come in, is I feel like I'm always working. I don't have a start and an end time. I'm constantly on. How does this affect my health? But also, what can I do to manage this new era of always being on?
The answer is complex, but on a simple way, for few people working at home, it's remarkable. They can be with their kids and family, but this part is really critical. Think of us that we need time to work and restore. You know, when your muscles tighten, they need to regenerate. Work is just like that. Our brain is just like that. We use essentially energy, thinking, and then we need to restore. So I would argue if you do this all the time, then eventually you will get exhausted, you get burned out, or whatever it may be. And many people who are working at home, because the ergonomics aren't as good as well, develop neck and shoulder pain. Most of the audience can identify that now when they worked at the computer for a while, they look outside and the world is more blurry for a little while, their eyes are more fatigued. Those are just the beginning symptoms. Imagine doing this for 10 or 15 years. So what can you do? One, I recommend this, and especially if people work at home and they use the same computer for socialization, because that's how they talk to their grandkids or to their friends. They watch it for media, you know, their films, they do social media, and then they work. I would recommend doing a ritualistic behavior that comes on work with athletics. What you do is you set a time. I go to work at 9 o'clock or 8 o'clock or 6 o'clock. It makes a difference. Set a time. That's when you go to work. What you do is behind your computer screen, put a different picture. Set a symbol. This is now my office, just like you would do when you go to work. You enter a new environment. That becomes the cue of work. And use visual cues around that. And then take breaks. The critical part, I can only emphasize, take breaks. Use a computer program such as stretchbreak.com. It's free. Installed in your computer every 20 minutes or 30 minutes. It reminds you, stretch, wiggle. I know the impulse you'll have is not to do it because it interrupts me. Really do an experiment. Do it and do it. As we found with our employees when they did this, even the ones who said, I have no complaints. I'll never forget when the person came back the next week and he said, you know, Eric, there's life after 5. And what he meant was by taking these breaks, he had much more energy for the family. So take breaks during the day. Take a lunch break. Don't drink coffee at your desk. Leave and be with your family members separately. And make it almost a ritualistic pattern. It is ritual which you want to develop. And then have your family collaborate in that ritual. That at 10:30 you take a coffee break, you all walk around the block. I don't care what it is. You know, and then at the end of the day, say, now it's done. And I realize work is never done for many people.
Yeah.
However, if you keep working and working and working and working and working and working and working, you'll get slowly more exhausted. Your brain will be less creative. If you want to be creative, really work hard, then take a walk in nature. Let almost the unconscious solve some of the problems. Take a different perspective. The other part is by changing body posture, you change your brain. We keep forgetting that. But you know, whether you go out and play sports, it makes a difference what you do, or just a gentle walk. If you start breathing differently, your physiology changes, your cognition changes. So I would have to argue it is not simple. Because let me go back with an example of evolutionary traps, because I think it's critical once that concept is understood. An evolutionary trap is really our resulting behavior that is triggered by something which used to allow us to survive a lot. Let me give an example with sugar. Mother's milk is sweet. Babies are conditioned, you could say, or have evolved to want something sweet, because sweetness is usually not poisonous unless it's lead paint or something like that. It's almost always nutritious. Therefore, automatically, children would like sweets. We don't have an easy limit in our brain to say, stop eating sweets, because it's the energy we need. For an evolutionary perspective, there was not enough calories anyway, so we needed to eat it. And so now when we eat too much simple sweets, we eat too much simple carbohydrates, and then we develop type 2 diabetes. It's really an evolutionary trap. If you go to nature, to the extreme place, I can think of the albatross at Midway Island. Albatrosses are these big seabirds that they really soar over the ocean for thousands of miles, and they mate in Midway Island. There you see that of the 5,000 chicks that are there, 2,000 die each year. And most of them die of plastic ingestion. They were fed plastic. Why did that happen? And if you go to the beaches, you see these lovely birds, all with feathers, the skeletons, and the leftover intestinal tracts of pieces of plastics. These birds were flying over the Pacific. They saw something shimmering in the water, which probably used to be a fish or food. They would then get it. They would eat it. It would have the algae growing on it, so it tasted like that. They would swallow it, except these are the little pieces of plastic in the Pacific gyrus. They would digest it or regurgitate it back to the chick. Do we blame the albatross for being so stupid to not be able to discriminate? It evolved that this allowed them to survive most. So it's really that the cue was similar. The albatross had no choice. For many of us, the computer screens, the notifications, which are really magnified and superbly designed by our IT companies, are to capture our eyes and attention. Because that signal says there's danger. And if I'm walking on the savannah, I need to react to that signal. So we need to control ourselves. And so therefore set boundaries, take breaks, etc.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. We had several other questions come in, but I think we've actually answered them. One was about training with young people and working with young people. Another one was about accountability, which you've just described. You have to set up an environment of accountability in these areas. And I'm aware that we're coming up on 40 minutes now. We took a break at about 20. So now, according to the 20-minute rule, it's time to take another break. So I want to kind of wrap this up. We could continue to extend this. What I heard you just say about tech is, you didn't say this, but I'm going to paraphrase a thing here. Tech is in some way, it's the new plastic for humans. We talk about plastic pollution, and you've just described, a problem that it's having on the environment and animal life. But humans use tech, and if we see that shiny thing, we need to realize that it's not food, and that it's properly managed, as we've described here. And you've given us some tremendous tips in those areas. I want to have you back, so I'm going to ask you if you'll agree to that, so that I can follow up on that, because there's so many things that you've done over your career and you continue to do that are really so important in these areas. In those areas, I'll come back, and I know you've written a book on cancer and that you've had a lot of experience with that and the interaction. We're working on that area right now. We're going to have a theme of that coming up in next year. So if it's okay with you, I'll ask you to come back and we'll do one where we talk about that. So
I'll be honored. And if I think finally for people in the computer, I would just give only one hint. Or basically a few. One, technology, we live with it. The key is, how do you make it work for you versus it controlling you? Keep always remembering that much of this is very similar to sitting on a chair. When you go to the office, you get a chair. And if the chair is inappropriately designed, you have no option to sit correctly. However, if the chair is appropriately designed for you, You still may not sit well because you need to change yourself. And one of the most useful concepts, I would say, are mastery skills like slow breathing, becoming aware of your posture changes. We use a device called an upright, which you put on your spine, which every time I slouch, it vibrates. So it reminds me to take my break and do stuff, because I am so captured by the technology that I need an external boundary and controls. And then set boundaries in one's life. Go outside. Today's a gorgeous day in California. Really is where I live. And after this, I'll go outside for a short walk, because if I don't do it, then I'll be just as much captured like anyone else and just sit and sit and sit.
Well, you've provided us some very simple and easy to do things that can make a big difference in your life. I've noticed my posture already during this talk change. I'm going to actually, after this is turned off, I'm going to turn off my cell phone, and I'm going to go out and do some of those exercises and movements that you just talked about in those areas. So thank you very much for all you've done over the decades and what you do now, and especially now at this unprecedented time of change. This is a time when everyone, can take the opportunity to change and incorporate that into their life. So thank you, Dr. Pepper, and thank you. Look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to share. And also really, the point you made so strongly is the assessments need to be holistic. We are a whole being. Thank you for really supporting that perspective and creating.
Good to see you. Take care.
Take care.